Good evening, everyone. Thanks for participating today. My name is Hassan. I'm the senior advisor, and director of Australian Political Institute. And we organize this webinar series at least once in a month. And I'd like to thank Myra-Ann to participate and to be the keynote speaker for tonight. Um, I'd like to prolong my talk much because we really need to hear from Myra and what she has to say about managers to leaders. It's a very interesting topic area. So, Myra, and I'd like to, hand over the floor to you. So it's yours now. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much, Hassan. Um, Tonight, well, I'm Myra-Ann, as Hassan said, and I've been teaching leadership and leadership-related subjects in corporates, both large and small, for over 25 years. So I've had some absolutely brilliant opportunities to see some fantastic leadership and the outcomes that we're able to achieve, but I've also seen some really woeful leadership and what happened as a result of that. Now, the point of this program is to arm you with some tools and insights that will let you become whatever kind of a leader you would like to be, presumably a really good one. Um, Becoming a good leader is a journey, and there are definitely some things to consider in order to become a stronger and more effective leader. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this program. And I am working with my little, there we go. Oh, it works. Okay. Um, it worked when I tried it on my machine, but I wasn't sure about here. Okay, so in this course, we really believe that um, people learn better through an interactive participation mode. So this course offers a variety of ways that people can participate. So for example, it offers the opportunity for you to participate and interact with the trainer. You can interact with the large group. There are opportunities to pose a question if you want that from the group, and there's opportunities to work with a small group as well. Um, some people are more comfortable in small groups than they are in big groups, so this offers a variety of opportunities for people to, be in their comfort zone one way or the other. And since we're talking about leadership, let's go ahead and see what we've got here. So in talking about leadership, let's just make it clear. Just because you hold a title, whether you're a team leader or a supervisor or a manager, a general manager, even a CEO, that gives you authority over people, but it doesn't make you a leader. So leadership is another part of managing. So there's both parts. There's managing, which is getting the day-to-day stuff done, and then there's leading, which is helping people see your vision and moving forward. And that becomes, as you become more senior, that becomes the bigger component of your job. Some of you who are listening in tonight might be at the beginning of your leadership career as a more junior manager. And so there will, in this program, there will be tips for you on where to start looking at what you need to be doing to develop your leadership skills. And for some of you, you might be a lot more senior. And if that's the case, then this will give you an opportunity to fill in those gaps where you feel like you might not be as strong as you could be. So there's, either way, there's opportunities for you to pick up information that might help you. If you aren't a good leader, if you're just a manager, people are going to do what you say because you have power over them. But they'll wait for you to tell them what to do. They won't actually initiate any way of helping you to get to your destination. If you have a goal to reach, you're always going to be pulling them along, and it's not only exhausting, but it's very ineffective. So how do you become a real leader, someone that other people will follow? Well, the first thing is getting to know yourself. And knowing yourself starts, first of all, leadership is about helping other people move forward and so on. So you need to understand yourself to do that. And the more we understand how we come across to people and the impacts that we have on them, the more we can make different choices that give us different results in different circumstances. So, So the first job in our developing a set of leadership tools is to start looking at knowing more about ourselves. Think about it like this. You've got a little theater running in your brain that shows you the mindsets that dictate your beliefs and your behaviors. And those have been with you for a long time. You picked them up over life. Sometimes they've really worked. Other times maybe they haven't been as effective. But you kind of do them on autopilot because it's what you've got. But some of them might need to be a little polished up. So it could be that maybe what you need to do is look at a bit of a software update. And the course that we're talking about is going to offer you the possibility to explore some new versions that you might be able to install and have at your fingertips then to use in the future. The next thing you really want to think about when you're a leader, there's a whole range of them we're going to go through here, but knowing where you're going. So as a leader, you have to get out in front of people and let them know what the goal is. I mean, leadership is about being out in front and showing people the way. So part of your role as a manager is in taking care of the day-to-day things, but the leadership role is helping people move forward with you to whatever the goal is that you're shooting for. And in order to really nail that one, you've got to have some goal setting. You've got to be clear on the outcomes that you want. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into an organization where that really wasn't clear. And also, one of the things people don't tend to think about, but it's really important, is what are the roadblocks to your success? You might want to get someplace, but you have to be really clear on what's going to get in my way. And then how do I plan around those? And we'll talk about a lot of that in the program. And to do that, that means that you have to be able to engage people to come with you to get to your goal. And that's not as easy as it sounds. You have to have some skills around getting people committed to go with you. And that's one of the things the program is about. So let's look at, well, what are some of the ways of learning about myself that will give me some of that capacity? And one of the things to know about is, who are you? And that's not a casual question. When you look at the face in the mirror in the morning, who do you see? You know, do you see somebody that you really, that really is the way other people see you? I know this one was a real problem for me when I was a young manager, a manager starting out. I thought I was coming across like a pussycat. I'd look in the mirror, I'm a nice person. Take my word for it, I'm a nice person. So here I was thinking that what other people were seeing was the same image or the same me. But in fact, it wasn't. When I started to get feedback, when I did some leadership programs and there were some ways of getting feedback to me, what I found out was, instead of being the pussycat I thought I was, other people were experiencing me like a tiger and with the claws out. This couldn't have been pleasant. It certainly wasn't part of my image. Not a good look. So, you know, how do others experience you? And who is the person that you want to be? Who is the person when you look in the mirror, that you want other people to see? And are those two congruent? For me, they really weren't, but I was completely unaware of it until I started to get some feedback. So one of the ways that we can look at our behavior is to examine, oops, back, a little more forward there. Sorry about this. Technology has never been my strong suit. I'm much better with people. So there are a lot of ways to look at behavior, but we're going to keep it really simple, and we're going to use a 4-quadrant model, because 4-quadrant models we can do quickly and easily. And see if you recognize yourself in any of these things that I'm going to be talking about. And also think about what styles the people who you work with might be, or your partner, or somebody on the soccer team that you might be having trouble with, or something like that. Just have a little think as we're going through this. So first of all, there are some people who are outgoing, and there are some people who tend to be more reserved. And there are some people who are people, and some people who tend to be more task oriented. And there's nothing wrong with any of those, just the way it is. Some of the people who are outgoing and more task oriented tend to be more directing, demanding, decisive, because they're more about the task and getting the job done than they are about the people and how they're going to get the job done. Excuse me. On the other hand, there are people who are outgoing, but they're more people oriented. So they tend to be more inspiring. They're more involved with people. They tend to interact more and so on. They're more about, they go more naturally toward the people. They get the job done, don't get me wrong. They do the task as well. But their natural inclination is to go more toward people than it is to the task. And then we've got the reserved folks. So first of all, we've got people who are reserved, but they're people. So they have a big need to help people and to support people and so on. So they're steady and they're systematic. They put things in place for us to be able to do our work better. They're right there to support in the team, that sort of thing. But they do it more quietly than the people who are more outgoing do. And they are a huge valuable resource to any team. They're just different than the other styles, as the other styles are different to them. And then you've got the reserved people who tend to be more task oriented, and they tend to be like more careful, more controlled, more cautious. And we need some of those people too. So we actually need all of these. And all of us can go to these positions too. It's not like any of us are missing any of this. But there are some of these that you would more likely say, well, yeah, that sounds more like me. Like when I look at this, I'm an introvert. So I know from years of working with myself and figuring things out that I'm more of a systematic, steady, supportive kind of person. And I tend to be more of a people person, so more of the inspiring and so on. However, I'm a mother of 3 kids. As my kids were growing up, I could move real quick right into directing, demanding, and decisive if I needed to do something with my kids because the situation required it. So we can pull up what we need to in certain circumstances. There just tend to be some that we're more comfortable with. So what style do you think you are when you look at that? And when you look at it, which styles do you think are more likely to work well together? And conversely, which ones do you think are more likely to conflict? So in the program, we take a close look at that so that you figure out what your style is. And you can start to look at some of the people around you that are important to you and that you'd like to work a little better with. And we work out, well, here are some strategies and what can I do about this? And, you know, are there ways that I can kind of open up my repertoire of behaviors a bit so other people, oh, hello. So other people can experience me in a way that's useful and so on. So what style are you? Oops. Yeah. What style are you? And the next question is, and why does that even matter? So let me tell you about Melbourne McBroom. Melbourne McBroom, well, let's start out. In 1978, so this was a while ago, in 1978, United Airlines Flight 173 took off from Denver, Colorado to Portland, Oregon, and it had 189 people on board. Melbourne was the captain of the flight, and he was known for his temper. Now, a ways out of Portland, as they started to prepare for landing, a warning light showed up. They're little red lights and they flash on the panel in front of them. Mel got fixated on that light that said there might be a landing gear problem. And so he went into a holding pattern. Well, actually a holding pattern is what he should have done. It's the right thing to do. You go into the holding pattern, you check out the light. It can be sometimes just a fuse is blown behind the light. So you need to know whether you really have a problem or there's something that you have to do something about. But if you don't figure it out quite quickly, then the next step is to have the flight crew in the cabin start to prepare for an emergency landing, just in case there is something that goes wrong. Melbourne, on the other hand, kept ignoring the fact that he was continuing to stress over this, and he kept staying with the light, even though the fuel was getting lower and lower, and the crew told him that the fuel levels were dropping. And it took quite a while, but finally, 2 of the 4 engines shut down. That was a sign. 2 engines shut down, and he realized that he didn't have enough fuel to make it to the runway. So he ended up actually landing in a wooded residential area about 9 kilometers from the runway. Now, because he was such an experienced pilot, things weren't as bad as they could have been, but nonetheless, 10 people died that day. 8 passengers, the flight engineer, the senior flight attendant, and as it happened, the co-pilot lived to tell the tale. Now, the interesting thing about this, and it's important to us, so this is not a story just for the heck of it, the fallout from the investigation was a turning point in cockpit safety. And the reason it's important to us is because for the first time, they realized that human interaction, which we now call emotional intelligence, is just as important as the technical knowledge to do a job. And they've also included that now in fire crews who are working emergencies, surgeons in surgical teams in operating theaters, people like that, where it's important that everybody really focuses together. And so because of what happened and the knowledge that they got out of that research, a lot of changes have been made. Now, Melbourne was an expert at his job. He'd been with the airline for 20 years. He had 27,000 hours of flight time. The guy was really skilled, just like a lot of the managers in the organizations that you work for. However, he was also known for his temper. So while he had the skills, the technical skills to do the job, he had no emotional intelligence. And while the co-pilot and the flight engineer told him that the fuel levels were dropping, they were too afraid of his temper to actually confront him. And the outcome of that was that it was determined that the cause of the accident was actually his behavior. So the crash was caused by his behavior, and that is a consequence of their fear of his reaction. But ironically enough, out of the 10 people who died, that included the flight engineer, who was one of the very people who was afraid of Mel's temper, so didn't really push the issue that they were running out of fuel. But it did a lot for people to recognize that we now have a real need to think about emotional intelligence. So just what is emotional intelligence? Let's talk about that. Oops. We've known for a long time about IQ. So IQ is intelligence quotient. We think about people who have high IQs as being smart, and they are smart, but IQs actually measure how we think. It's not what we know, it's how we think. So it's how we take what we know and do something with it that then becomes something out in the world that labels as a high IQ. EQ, emotional intelligence, is a different kind of smart. EQ is actually about how you manage relationships and how you manage yourself and how you manage your relationships. So they're a little bit different, and it's an important distinction. So as a coach, I know I've been called in multiple times when someone has been considered really good. This is senior guys, and I say guys, I guess, because mostly it has been guys. They're really good at what they do, but they're not going to be promoted any further with their IQ as it stands, particularly around their self-awareness and their self-management abilities. So the next step for them would be something like a Harvard or an MIT or some sort of big program somewhere in the world that's going to further prepare them for a move. But that's not going to happen if they can't come to grips with the behaviors that are getting in their way. So I get called in, as do a lot of coaches, to work on these people, and it's mostly around IQ. I mean, we can teach them strategy. How do you work with strategy, and how do you work with all that kind of stuff? But really, the biggest request that we get is working with people and how they behave with other people. In fact, studies show that EQ is 15 to 45% of the reason why some people have the job successes that they do, where IQ is responsible for less than 6%. And recent research has shown us that of the Fortune 500 companies, 80% in the Fortune 500 companies are promoted because of EQ, not because of IQ. A lot of these companies figure they can teach somebody something, some skill. But unless the person has the ability to deal with people and the right kind of personality to go out into the world and make things happen, then they'd rather promote somebody who's got that than who's got all of the technical skills. And another part of recent research has shown us that emotions underpin every decision that we make and every single action that we take. So now it's been flagged that we have to learn how to manage our own emotions. And we have to be able to deal with the emotions of those that we work with as well. I used to work for the Commonwealth Bank in Australia, big bank, and before I got there, one of the things that they said to their leaders was, leave your emotions at the door. And that wasn't just the Commonwealth Bank. It was everywhere around that time. Organizations thought that you could walk in and just not deal with emotion. Just got into your let's be a manager mindset. And that's what you did. And it didn't matter what somebody's emotions were. And it certainly didn't matter what the manager's emotions were. We were going to ignore all of that. Now we know we can't do that. Now, there are two levels of competence around EQ. And the first one is around personal competence. So me and myself, my relationship to myself. And the other one is me and my relationship to other people. Goldman did a lot of work on this and wrote a book on it and so on. And it kind of was the standard for emotional intelligence for a long time. And the first one under, if we start to look at self, is self-awareness. Now, self-awareness is stuff like emotional awareness, being able to recognize your feelings and the effects that they're having on those around you, which is exactly what I wasn't doing when I thought I was the pussycat coming across like the tiger. So being able to recognize that. Accurate self-assessment, being clear on your own strengths and your own weaknesses. I mean, it would be really nice if we could be strong in everything, but it's not reality. We're human beings, so we have strengths in some things, but not in others. So the more we can be understanding and honest with ourselves, the better for us. Because if we have strengths, we can keep on building on this. But if we don't recognize weaknesses, we never start to build on those. We never start to work on them to make them better, to become better people in that area. And the other thing is self-confidence, so being clear about your own self-worth and your capabilities and so on. And the other one under personal is self-management. So now we figured out kind of how we need to be self-aware, but how do we manage ourselves? And some of those things include things like emotional self-control. So if you wake up angry one morning, do you go to work and let your anger show to other people? So you have some sort of an disruptive emotion that's going to get in the way of what's going on. It's the ability to stay composed and unflappable even when things get tough. And do you really have many days when things aren't tough these days? Corps are hard to work for and hard to work in. It's a tough life. There's trustworthiness, having high standards of honesty, integrity, and being ethical. There's adaptability. This is an important one because it's the ability to handle change smoothly, even when there's multiple demands and shifting priorities. And there's not a lot of days that isn't going on. So it's a key skill to have, to learn how to be adaptable and not get all upset over it. You can just learn how to kind of flow with the whole thing. Do you have an achievement drive? Are you results oriented so that you have a high drive to meet objectives and standards? And what about initiative? Having the readiness to act on opportunities. And also a really big important one is, as a part of that, is operating from a hope of success rather than a fear of failure. Not a lot happens if we live with fear of failure. We're afraid to take the next steps or whatever. So the more you're able to operate from hope in terms of initiative, the more effective you can become. Innovativeness is a need so that you're comfortable and open to new ideas and information. So if somebody comes to you with an idea that's you haven't done before, do you automatically say, no, we're going to keep doing things the way we always have? Or do you say, okay, well, let's take a little look at that. Is that possible, and is it useful in this environment, and so on? So you're willing to examine them. And then there's conscientiousness, and this one's an important one too. It's taking personal responsibility for your own performance and holding yourself accountable to a high standard of performance. What it isn't is blaming others.
I think you need to change the slide because it's stuck in the social. So.
Sorry, you're right. Thank you.
Sorry to intervene, yes.
I told you I'm not good with technology. My husband calls me a Luddite. Anyway, where was oh yeah. So what you don't want to do, because you're busy taking responsibility and actually holding yourself accountable, this doesn't mean blaming other people at all. And that's often what happens, isn't it? I mean, I'm pretty sure you can think of people who do what they do, and then if it doesn't work, they blame someone else rather than taking responsibility for it themselves. And a sense of commitment too, being able to align with goals of the group and the organization. All those things are part of the social awareness. Self-management rather. No, that wasn't. I haven't got to social awareness yet. There we go. Now we are though. So social awareness. So the first part was me and my relationship to self. And the other part of it was my relationship to how I manage myself. That's what we've just talked about. Now, social is about me and other people. So this first part is about how I am able to understand other people and so on. And the first part of that is empathy, or understanding other people. The ability to be sensitive to other people's feelings and perspectives and actually take an active interest in their concerns. I once had a coaching client, very, very senior, who said to me, does this really mean I have to like them? And, oh my God, I think we have a little problem here. We're not even trying to understand them. Anyway, so a service orientation is a part of this, anticipating and recognizing customer needs, meeting their customer needs. Organization awareness is another one. Leveraging diversity is one too. And organization awareness, this one catches a lot of people. A lot of people think they don't want to get caught up in politics. Ooh, I don't want to do that. That's yucky. That was me. But I was really naive because that's going on all the time anyway. And there are undercurrents going on all the time. So the better leaders are the ones who can keep a tab on that stuff and understand where the power relationships are, so they don't get caught short and all of a sudden have something happen that they couldn't anticipate. Leveraging diversity is, cultivating opportunities through lots of people from different backgrounds, and organizations these days are just huge with that. So it's really important to let everybody have a chance. There's so much that they can offer to make it a stronger, richer environment. And the second part of this is managing relationships. There's a lot in this, and we're not going to go through all of it in any kind of detail, but it starts with things like developing people. Do you actually develop them and give them opportunities? We need to be able to influence people. So do you have effective tactics for persuasion? Communicating is always important. And can you send a clear and convincing message? And nobody likes to manage conflict, but it's always going to be a part of the potential for things to happen in organizations. So we need to develop some skills around negotiating and resolving disagreements. Inspirational leadership, we're talking about leadership in general, but the inspirational part of that is being able to create enthusiasm, articulating a shared vision in such a way that people want to follow you, that they can get excited about it. And no organization is ever going to be safe if it doesn't have change. So being a change catalyst is important if you're going to be a leader. You need to be able to initiate and manage the process of change. Building bonds with people, nurturing relationships that are instrumental in being able to help you, and also being able to deal with team support, working with people collectively, if you will, around some goals. So that's what emotional intelligence is about. But there's another thing that's really important that we cover in the course too, and we're just going to talk about that briefly. And that is trust. Now, trust is a huge issue in teams. And there's some things I want you to think about that. For example, are you trustworthy? If I asked you that question in a course, what would you say? And who do you trust and why? You might want to think about this over the next few days. Who do you trust and why do you trust them? And also importantly, who do you not trust and why? And here's one for you. In those people that you don't trust, if I were to ask them if they're trustworthy, what do you think they would say? Would they say they're not trustworthy? My guess is they would say they were. So what we know about trust is that it can be a little complicated, and there's some things that make it easier for us to understand it. So let's look at the building blocks of trust. The first one is honesty. And we're not going to talk about honesty because, well, it's pretty much of a given. You either are or you aren't. We could spend some time on it, but there's more important things to talk about that people don't realize, like reliability, for example. People, if you're high on reliability, I do what I say I'll do. And for some people, that's really important. If you tell me you're going to do something and you don't, that starts to erode at my trust. If I'm somebody that reliability is really an issue for. Openness is another one. Who you are rather, is okay with me. I'm open to people. I like people. I'm going to be fine with you. Acceptance is another one. And that is an important one around feedback. I give feedback to people and I accept them. I'm not judging them. I'm just giving them feedback. And I accept feedback from them so that I can become better at what I do. And the last one is congruence. So what I say is what I mean, or some people would say, I practice what I preach. All of those are important, and we explore them a lot more. This is just a broad brush. We explore that a lot more in the program. Now, if you want more, then this is a one-day workshop that's going to take a much more in-depth look at all of this stuff. So your styles and the styles of others, we talked a little bit about that, understanding what software drives you and what might need to be updated, understanding what goes on for other people that can hinder you. If you're trying to get a job done, if the more you understand them, you'll find that there's some things that might actually get in the way of doing that. We'll be discussing that. And being more trusted and developing trust in your teams. So, in other words, presenting much of a view pretty much of how to succeed in an ever-changing world of corporate leadership. Now, I love teaching programs on leadership. They're really fun, actually. And I have the utmost respect for anybody who's willing to commit to developing their own capabilities further. So I'm kind of hoping that some of you will join me and we'll get to work together on that program. Now, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. And Hassan, it's over to you.
Thank you, Myra-Ann. We are recording this session, and this session will be available at the same URL link you used to register for this event. So it's there, and we will upload it within next 48 hours. And the way actually we organize our webinars is like our keynote speaker takes like 25 minutes to 30 minutes to talk about the topic area, and then we open the floor for question and answers. You can straight away switch on your microphone and ask the question. Or if you think that now actually you are feeling a little bit shy, then type in your question in the chat box. You can see that on the up ribbon, there is a chat box. You click it and type in your question. So I'll read it for Myra, and then we can go on from there. So please ask any questions if you have. But yeah, Errol, please go ahead.
So my question is, what advice would you give to a person who's taking on their first leadership role? What are the traps and pitfalls? What should they be looking at in terms of, I've got to do this at the very least to be able to start this journey smoothly?
Well, as I said when I was talking earlier, one of the biggest things is getting more acquainted with yourself and how you will fit into that role, how you will knowing yourself more, so you'll know that when you're dealing with other people, if this is kind of how I'm used to operating, then how can I operate with them better? And the more you understand yourself, at least that was certainly my experience, and I've been teaching this for years, and it's been the experience of lots of others, that the more you know yourself, the easier it becomes to work with other people. You can spot stuff in them that gives you tip-offs then in how to react or respond to them. Does that help? Okay. Any more?
Myra, I'd love to ask a question if I could.
Sure, Elizabeth.
So I've recently stepped into a role where I've been managing a team of approximately 8, purely remotely. So I've not met any of them in person. Do you have any suggestions in terms of ideas in terms of trying to create that sense of team and that sense of trust, but in a bizarre situation where it's purely remote?
Actually, I managed a company of 14 people, and it was all remote, and most of it we all work from home, and it was between here and Switzerland. So there were challenges around that. One of the things we did was to have a weekly, I know it sounds like a lot, but because they were remote and isolated from the rest of the team, we had a weekly team meeting. Everybody got on. We did things like, what are your interests, all that. I mean, all of this stuff would take place if you were in the same building and you got to know each other a little bit, but we had to force the issue so that everybody got to know each other a bit. We then developed past that over the next few times that we met, so that then we were more comfortable with each other talking about issues and how we might solve them and so on. And we could talk about what was different in this area versus what was different in this area and so on. And how you might, they could give each other ideas about how they might work. It worked really well in the end, but it took a little extra work. It's not as easy to manage a remote team as it is if they're sitting right in front of each other. Does that help, Elizabeth?
It does. I think what you're saying is you've really got to approach it almost like you would still if you were physically, but be quite purposeful about creating those opportunities.
Yeah, I think you do. There are there's some research, a lot of it actually, but there was some research around companies that are strictly remote. And some of them, one of them even sold to HP some years ago for, I think it was $12 billion or something like that. So not a small company. And they had people all over the world, literally. So they could start with a problem. At this point, somebody had a problem before they went to bed. And people could work on it all the way around the globe until that they woke up in the morning and would have the problem solved. And it was all done through team. They had, I think it was 2,000 people or something work for them around the world, and it was all done remotely. And that's the biggest example I've seen of how do you go about this. So when I had to do it, I took some of the hints about some of the things they did. And there's other companies, you can research them if you've got the time, but they all start with, you have to get closer to people. They can't work together as a team. They can work as individuals. But if you want them to bond as a team, they need to understand more about each other. They need to develop trust. And that takes a little bit of work to do that. And it might get a little resistance too, because, oh my God, you want us to meet every week? Yes, I do. And this is what we're going to do and why. Anyway, it works, or it did for us. Anybody else?
To add with you, Myra-Ann, I've seen like at times it works really well when you work in the online environment. If you share a couple of like fun or like very casual information about yourself, like how was your dog, how the dog was doing, and how the full price is going crazy kind of thing. This is out of work kind of like really work as a glue in the whole. I mean,
That's right.
informal mix of informal versus formal kind of like approach works really well. That's the kind of like my experience I have seen like that works when
Yeah, it
especially
does.
work
It
when
does.
you work in a remote environment, because people would like to know you in terms of what type of person you are, and when you share kind of like very day-to-day information with the person, they feel more close, they feel more dearer to you.
Well, I hate to use the term in a corporate sense, but here you go, guys. That's the stuff that's more from the heart. So oftentimes when we meet, we're doing all the head stuff, all the technical stuff and so on. But the glue for the team is the sort of stuff you're talking about, Hassan. The more we get to know each other, the more we start to trust each other, because that's the people part of us. And the more we see the real people part of us, the easier it is to trust, to be willing to come out and talk in front of people and so on. It's great. You're right.
Yep.
No more questions? Was I either that complete or that boring? One or the other. But
Can I ask you a broader question if there's time? Um,
Sure.
I um, I I also do a bit of teaching myself, and I do a lot of online teaching, but I'm feeling challenged because a lot of the time students won't turn their cameras on, they don't turn the microphones on. So, just broadening the comments you're making, how at an educational level, how do we connect with students? And, have you got thoughts around, what the future of education might look like?
well, working in the environment I'm working in right now, there are people I can't see. I don't know their names. I don't know what they look like. I don't know where they're from. Sometimes even understanding whether we've got people from different cultures. I mean, I was on a chat a while ago, webinar, and there were people from Bangladesh to the UK. So some of what you say might be different because you're trying to approach, be useful in terms of different cultures and so on. It's hard to know unless you get that information from people. I've just had to kind of bite the bullet and say, okay, this is not the way you're used to doing it. You got to get better at what you do somehow and connect with those people. But I never know. Unless they ask a question, or unless they somehow or another there's some interaction, or even if they question somebody else who's asked something, interact together. There's no way to know. It's just different.
Yeah.
I've been in a course room for 30 years. I've been teaching in universities. I've been online. I'm a Zoom person. My God, my eyeballs were practically Zoom shaped for a while there during COVID and so on. I coach around the world on Zoom and so on. I've gotten used to being online, but teaching a number of people without being able to connect more, my style is one that finds that difficult. There are some styles that might be listening in tonight, for example, that wouldn't have the same question you would because they're not people, they're task people. It's just different.
Thank you.
Anything else? Ooh, I can't hear you.
Yes, Tanvir, I saw you. You switch on the microphone, then you switch it off. Do you have any question? If your microphone is not working, then you can type in the chat box. But I think, Myra, you've done a great job. Thanks a lot for your excellent presentation. And again, we will have this presentation. I think Nazia is typing something. Let me have a look. Typing, okay. But we will have this available in the website, so you can have a look and revisit the session. But I mean, Myra-Ann, it's a wonderful topic. I think a lot of people wants to go to that role of like being a leader than a manager, and that really helps. That increase the efficiency of your kind of like business and like yeah. So managing a larger team, there's another challenging thing in managing the team because you have got different type of people within the team, and then as a manager you have to set kind of like your kind of approach, how you can really build that trust, and your four quadrant model at the same time, the trust building block model is really helpful and really I mean really interesting. And I'm just waiting for Nadia to finish her typing. Then if we get Nadia's question, I think then we can wrap up the session. Okay. Just to share one thing with you, because Elizabeth was asking like how you teach the class, or how, because the about the switching of the microphone or switching of the camera. The last job I was in, like, and there was a kind of like rule of thumb for the organization that when there is a company meeting, everybody should be switching on their camera. So you can't really switch off your camera and sit behind the kind of like a dark screen. So even the organization can help to come up with this kind of housekeeping rule, or the manager herself or himself can come up with the ideas that, hey, I'm more comfortable when I see you rather than when I can't see you, kind of thing. So if you can establish a couple of housekeeping rules to make your webinar or make your online interactions or web meetings more interactive, that really helps. So people knows that, okay, I have to switch on my camera. This is a rule. So they will reorganize their background, their dress up and everything. So that gives more of a like a, kind of like more formal kind of like approach when you come in. Because a lot of people don't switch on their camera, having a fear of that I may have a, I mean, I may have a background which is not kind of like good, or maybe I'm not well dressed, kind of thing. But if you set the rule before you organize the meeting, then people get ready and get mental. They have got the mindset that, okay, this.
No, that's helpful. And actually, I think even celebrating the one or two students that maybe do that, and making a big fuss about them, maybe that modeling those good behaviors might encourage a few more to do it as well. You can only try, can't you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And if you're the manager of the team, like you you have your remote team, you have some control over whether or not they actually do turn on their cameras and so on. But in the other teaching that you're doing, where you're doing it for people who aren't someone who reports to you, then that you don't have a lot of control over that. It's a much different situation.
No, and that's exactly it. We can have 300 students or whatever it might be, and one turns their camera on out of, and only 60 might join the live session or whatever. But I'm finding it's really hard to get that connection, and I feel if I feel it's testing me as a teacher, you know, my teaching as in a physical class where I could, you know, generate that warmth and that social interaction, you know, trying to now translate that to an online environment. I'm you know, using techniques like you mentioned, you know, mentioning dogs and things. I often do try and bring in some of my personality and certain things that are happening to me and how I'm feeling, and I make a few jokes and things like that. But yeah, sometimes you don't get that body language, or you know, I have no idea if they think I'm an idiot or if they are enjoying that. You know what I mean? It's really it's bizarre, and you know, yeah, so I'm still navigating what's, you know, what's appropriate, what's good, what do I keep doing, and I'm still to get my teaching feedback of this particular class that I've had this semester. But yeah, the teaching team are all happy to turn on their cameras and things, but even then, you know, I have only realized there's some of them have got, you know, huge issues that they weren't willing to reveal to me because we've never met, and we met in quite, you know, you know, I sort of just landed 2 weeks before a semester started, and you know, it was really difficult. I didn't really get a chance to get to know them well, but I'm back with them next semester, so I'm going to use a lot of your ideas for next time, because you know, we can now take that team and try and improve it for next semester. So
Well, when you do it in person, you can spend a little bit of time with an icebreaker that allows people to see a little bit about each other, and they get a little moment maybe to talk to each other even,
yeah.
Or interact in a small group, or you know, say something to the group. But you can't do that as easily when it's a remote one. It's harder.
Myra, if I read the question from Nazia, because I can see she has got similar sort of concern which Elizabeth actually raised, is just like she said, just concerned about my students who simply do not listen, whether online or in the class. How to engage better as a speaker? Thanks a lot, Myra.
Yeah. Well, Nadia, we understand your pain. It's not easy. And the more you know yourself as a teacher, the more you'll be able to do it better, I guess. I mean, that's what I keep working on, and I'm sure that's what you're doing, Elizabeth, querying, how can I do this better? But it's not easy. So I hope this was helpful.
I think with Nazia's question, we can wrap up the session today. And thank you again. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your question, Errol and Myra-Ann for participating, and of course, Nazia, thanks for coming in, and Dr. Kamrulbari. Thank you so much. We will organize our next webinar session next month, and we'll let you know again. Like, and every time we try to bring a like interesting topics. So, and we keep, I mean, we keep it available on the on our web links on our website, so people can go in and have a look. Page. Nadia is typing again, so should we just let us wait for maybe another 15 seconds for Nadia to ask a question, and then we'll wrap it up. Oh, okay, that's not a question. That's like love to attend. Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, yeah, guys. Yeah, thank you. Cheers. Yeah, have a good night and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye bye.